Next, please. We leave this out because we had this slide this morning. It's on funny phobias, allium phobia, fear of garlic, and fear of flutes, fear of beautiful women, fear of moles. These are all funny phobias, but they do not affect people at all. That means people would not come to my department for psychiatry to get treated for these phobias. Next, please. So we have to make a differentiation between the difference of realistic and pathological fear. Most people who come to my department, and maybe also to you as you are psychiatrists, you have to deal usually with people who have fears in crowds and elevators and mice. These are all things that are not very dangerous. But in our day-to-day life, we have really many problems when you read the media, the newspapers. We have realistic fears that we could have an accident, that we could get ill, but we could lose also loved ones. And especially in these times, we are afraid of war and terrorism. And also, of course, loss of money are the main fears of the people, not only in Turkey, but all over the world. It's the main fears that people have. And as you can see, I show you these pictures. One is, both pictures are of the same guy. His name is Felix Baumgartner. He was not afraid when he jumped out with a parachute over 40 kilometers from the space. You might have heard about this. But this same guy who was not afraid of jumping out of the plane, he was very afraid in his suit. You know, as on the right picture, you see that he got agoraphobia in his suit. So we have to differentiate these kinds of fears. Realistic fears, this is about things that happen every day, like a terror attack and everything that could happen to us. We could have a car accident. But the people who come to our departments for psychiatry, they get treated for very not dangerous things like mice or elevators. So when we have a terror attack in the US, there was in 2001 the attack on the World Trade Center. I couldn't realize that any more people would come to my department for being treated for anxiety. That means whatever happens, also in these times when we had these terrible terror attacks all over France and England and Germany and Turkey, people did not come more frequently to our department to be treated for anxiety. So the next slide, please. Phobias go back to 100,000 years ago, when people were afraid of deep water and heights and thunderstorms and the saber-toothed tiger and snakes and wolves and dogs and cats. These were dangerous things, and this has some evolutionary explanation why we have phobias. That means 100,000 years ago, the people who were bitten by a spider, they didn't survive. And so they didn't have children, and those are not our ancestors. Our ancestors are the people who were afraid of spiders, snakes, and the wolf and the saber-toothed tiger. That means those people who had primitive fears of these dangerous animals, they survived and the others did not. This explains why many people today are afraid of thunderstorms and heights and deep water. And also you see on the left side this nice dog. There are many people who are afraid of this kind of dogs, and some people are also afraid of cats, although they are not dangerous. This goes back to our primordial fears, because our primitive fear system cannot distinguish between the tiger and the cat, and cannot distinguish between the wolf and this funny dog. And this is why we still have these primordial fears, because of the evolution. Also, animals are afraid of other animals and have these primitive fears. And many of the phobias that we deal with in our departments of anxiety disorders have to deal with things that were dangerous 100,000 years ago. So the next slide, please. Another example here, this was the highest tower in the world a couple of years ago, where you could look 342 meters through a glass bottom. I was standing on this glass bottom and I could not, I got a panic attack. So then I found out that I have a primitive fear system in my brain, which tells me that I have a problem because I'm not a bird and I cannot fly, and this primitive fear system could not know that there was glass below me, because the primitive fear system is 1 million years old and the glass is only 3,000 years old. The first glass was invented 3,000 years ago, but this primitive fear system in my brain is so old that it does not know what glass is, and this is why people are getting afraid on this glass bottom. Next slide, please. That means phobias, the fear of objects or situations that are not dangerous or are not very dangerous. Like the spiders in Germany, they are all completely harmless. They don't do anything. They don't bite in Germany, but almost every German is afraid of spiders. But only natural objects or phenomena can lead to phobias, like deep water, heights, darkness, insects or dogs, but not artificial things like electric power outlets. Although it's much more dangerous to touch an electric power outlet than to touch a spider in Germany. Maybe different in Turkey about the spiders, but in our country there are no dangerous spiders. And just because it was a survival benefit to have fears of these situations, mankind survived all these 100,000 years. The same is true for animals. And if you have a monkey who sees a snake for the first time in his life, he will get fear because he has this inborn fear of snakes. And next slide, please. In the last, we have heard already that everybody is in fear right now. We had these terrible terror attacks, one in Berlin and one in Ortaköy in Istanbul, and also in Nice and in St. Petersburg in Russia. We had all these terrible attacks, and so many people are now afraid. And I get many interviews from the media about these terror attacks, and they ask me, will we become a society of fear? Because all the media are full of these terror attacks, and many people do not dare to go out, like in Istanbul. They don't dare to go to the Taksim Square and other places where many people used to be. And everybody's afraid right now. And in my presentation, I will show you that maybe we will find a way how to deal with this problem. But at the moment, it is like all the elections in Europe. You can see that people in the elections or the elections are dominated by this issue of terrorism. Every politician says, I want to save our country from terrorism, and there's no country in Europe and also Turkey and the US where the government doesn't see this as a priority issue for the elections. Next, please. This was a survey in Germany last year, and so usually there's a company doing this survey every year, and in the last years, usually number one of the fears of Germans was getting old and be sick and losing your money when you're aged, or having to go to a hospital. But now, this last year, terrorism was number one of the fears in Germany, and I bet that it would be the same in Turkey if you would do the same survey in Turkey. Political extremism and like Taliban and IS and the PKK and all these terror organizations is also number one terror issue in the fears of the Germans in the last years. And also problems with the refugees. It's quite an issue in all the countries in Europe. And the next one is inability of politics to settle the problem. And then only 55% is severe illness. In the last years, it was completely different. The next slide, please. And this is, I see something on my slide. Maybe can you put this away? This new version of DivX is available, update now. I cannot do anything about it, but maybe you don't see it, hopefully. Okay, so you know that Donald Trump, President of the United States, had this, undersigned this contract that no one from many Islamic countries should go to the US. And this was a survey from the US looking at the deaths in the last years in the US, and they found that only 2 Americans died from Islamic jihadist immigrants, and from far right-wing terrorists 5. And if you put all the Islamic terrorists together, including those who were born in the US, it was 9 deaths. But 21 people were killed by children who were armed. And this is much more. And also 31 killed by lightning, 69 killed by lawnmowers, and being hit by a bus, 264. Falling out of bed is 737, and being shot by another American, almost 12,000 people. So if Donald Trump wants to change something in this country and make life more safe, he should not keep people from Islamic countries out of his place. He should take care of the people who are allowing the arms in the US, and he's one of them. He was not against the new law for weapons in the US. The next slide, please. And the problem is, why are we afraid of terrorism so much at the moment, is that because this is considered a new and uncontrollable danger. Most people think that when I go to Istanbul, it's a very dangerous place, but on the other hand, it's a very rare thing to be killed by a terrorist worldwide. The chance is 1 to 27.3 million. Bicycle accident was 1 to 140,000, and just falling and be killed by a fall is 1 to 15,000. To be killed by a stroke, 1 to 250, and to be killed by cancer, 1 to 160. Most deaths occur in most industrial countries by smoking, alcohol, lack of exercise, and unhealthy nutrition. But most people do not do anything against this. They keep on smoking and they keep on drinking alcohol, and they have lack of exercise and everything. So I think even if we are very much afraid, we have to always to think that the chance for every one of us to be killed by a terror attack is very low. There are some countries where there have been more attacks, like in Turkey or in France, where over 200 people were killed in the last years. But still, this is a very rare event, although it's very sad that it happens. And also, we are afraid that they are getting more, and no one can, not the politics, not the police can help us, because there will be always terrorists, and there will be more attacks, but still then the deaths by attack will still be less than from bicycle accident and everything else. Next, please. And why are we afraid of these rare events? Because some of the fears that we have go back to these primordial fears from the evolution. Like the risk to die in a plane crash is 1 to 10 million, and the chance to win 1 million euros in a lottery is about 1 to 14 million. Still, many people are playing lottery, but there are even much more people who are afraid of planes. And why are we afraid of planes more than of car accidents and bicycle accidents? It's because we are no birds. When we are in the air, our primitive anxiety system says you are no bird, you will fall down. And because this primitive anxiety system does not know what Airbus and Boeing is, and so the primitive fear system in our brain thinks that we will surely die when we are in the air. And this is why the risk is overrated, because it goes back to some primordial fear. Next slide, please. There are many things are more frequent than plane crashes, like death by falling coconuts in Thailand. Kill more tourists, like 300 tourists every year in Thailand, and be hit by a donkey in Greece, 300 deaths per year, and swallowing of pens in Germany, 300 deaths per year. And like in the last year, 313 women were murdered, and 154 were victims of their partner. So, but no one would think when he goes to marry someone that that there's a high danger to be killed by your partner. It's higher than many other things. But no one would think about this when going to a marriage. The next slide, please. That means we have these two fear systems in our brain. One is intelligent fear system, and probably this is in the prefrontal cortex, where the intelligent brain is. This fear system is able to process learning experience. When you have had bad experience, you have heard of someone who was killed in a war or in a terror attack, then this is processed in your intelligent brain. And this fear system has a slow reaction time, because it has to check all the experience and all that you have read in the media and what you have seen in television. And then it makes assessment about the danger. It also understands rules and laws. You know that you're not afraid of children, but you may be afraid of people running around with a knife. And also, you know that many rules and laws exist that control our life. This fear system is able to understand these rules, and it is also able to process social cues, that you know that what you should not do in social situations and what you should do. But this system is also exists in dogs. Also, dogs have some social feeling, or monkeys. They have a really nice social system in their brain, but it's compared to humans very limited. And then on the other side, on the right-hand side, you have this primitive fear system. It's inborn and it's inherited. Why is it inherited? We know that all the anxiety disorders, also including this specific phobias, are inherited. And this is very important because if they were not inherited, so every human and every animal would do the same mistakes again. You have to have this inborn fear of snakes, otherwise you would run into the next rattlesnake and be bitten, and you make this experience that a rattlesnake bite is fatal, but there's no way how you can use this experience later in life because you're dead. This system has a very fast reaction time. That means it overrides the intelligent brain in dangerous situations. It is because it was the primordial system. It comes from the old times when we were 100,000 years ago living in caves. And this is why this brain system is stronger than the intelligent one, and it cannot be changed by talking. So if you do like CBT, CBT works only in the intelligent fear system. It can teach you about rules, it can teach you about social cues and social life, and it can cure social phobia and all these fears, but it cannot change this primitive fear system that warns you of snakes. This is why, if you look at the warnings for cigarettes, Sigara içmek öldürüyor on the cigarette, means your intelligent fear system reads this and says, well, I should not smoke. And then your primitive system says, well, but smoking I like. And then in the end, you find yourself smoking again. This is because there are these two systems. Next slide, please. Now let me talk about fear of strangers. Like we have in many countries, we are afraid of strangers and people from other countries. And also in Germany, there's many people who are very afraid of all the fugitives that come in from Syria and many other places and from Africa. Because we had over 1.3 million refugees in the last year, and many people are afraid of these strangers. The next slide, please. This is also a very primitive fear, the fear of strangers. The Homo sapiens exists since 200,000 years. And in those days, humans were organized in small groups of 25 people. They were hunters and collectors. And in these tribes did not mingle with other tribes. They just kept away from them. They cared for themselves. And sometimes they fought each other in times of restricted resources. The tribes fought each other for food, mate, and territory. And those humans who were organized in tribes had a survival benefit. And the social attitude towards their own tribe was good, but also on the other side, aggressive behavior was also rewarded. That means these tribes did everything for their own tribe and everything against the other tribe. And this is also some inherited fear that also the people who live today still have this primordial fear of the other tribe. And this explains why we have so much fear of people from other countries. Next slide, please. And we have aggression among primitive tribes is very common. There are some tribes who still live today in some countries. You see below some people from Amazonas region, from Iban, the Ibans in Borneo and also in Nigeria. These are still headhunters. And we know from the life of these tribes that the life is quite dangerous in these tribes, because most men are killed in fights. 30% of the men are killed in these tribes. And the risk to die in a fight was much higher in primitive tribes than in the US cities with the highest crime rate. It's because this inborn fear of the humans in former countries. Although we think that we are today, everyone is very aggressive, it was even worse in those times when everybody was organized in tribes. And the life was not very long for these people due to these fights among humans. It's a pity that humans are organized like this, but still we have these genes in our brains, everyone. This xenophobia gene, that means afraid of strangers in our primitive fear system. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now let me talk about another system, which is the opposite of the fear system. The opposite of the fear system is the reward system. We have a so-called reward system in our brain. It's also a very primitive system, like the fear system. And it's you have a release of endorphins in this brain system when you do things like when you're in a danger and you're jumping off with a parachute, or when you're sitting in a sauna, or when you're doing windsurfing, and when you listen to nice music, you have this an activation in your endorphin system, which is the reward system. Next slide, please. The intelligent brain, the reward system and the fear system, this is a little bit like Freud's 3 instances that he developed. He said we have the ego, the super ego, and we have this the it. They call it it in English, yes. And the it is a little bit like the reward system, and the super ego is like the fear system, and the ego is like the intelligent brain. The reward system says is always against dangers. It's not afraid. It just wants to have reward, like food and sex. And the fear system says, well, this is no, you shouldn't do this. This is dangerous. And then the intelligent brain has to deal between those two. You might wonder why I'm showing you this picture of an elephant in Thailand. This little boy on the elephant is like the intelligent brain. He is intelligent and much more intelligent than the elephant, and he can direct the elephant everywhere where he wants to go. But the elephant is like the reward system or like the fear system. It's when the elephant gets crazy, then the little boy jumps off. And this is the same in the human brain. If one of these systems is going crazy, either the reward system or the fear system, then the intelligent brain doesn't have anything to say, because it's the older system. The others are the older systems, and this is why they have they override the intelligent brain. And this happens like the reward system when someone is crazy, when he is people who are sexual offenders, they have a problem with the reward system. On the other hand, our anxiety patients have a problem with the fear system. And as a rule, these two should be well organized and well balanced. Next, please. Yes, there should be a balance between the reward system and the fear system. Usually the intelligent brain is doing this job. But if someone goes wrong, if someone if someone is fanatic, religious fanatic, then reward system is also a problem, and but usually these two should be in a balance. Next, please. Next slide, please. Why are we afraid? In many situations, the roller coaster principle, when the primitive fear system makes you think that you will fall out of the roller coaster in the next curve. But the fear system is activated, and this is a stress situations, endorphins are released. After the curve, the anxiety is gone, but the endorphin stays in the blood, causing a feeling of well-being and euphoria. This is why when we have some dangerous situations, are not killed by these dangerous situations, then we have endorphins in our brain. This is why you pay money for the roller coaster. Once you have survived a critical situation, if you've been shot at, or you have been in a terrorist attack and you have not been hit, but it was close to you, then you have this endorphin release. Next slide, please. And this is why many people have a desire to go into fear situations. Yeah, there you can see this guy with a sky suit jumping from a plane. He has an endorphin release when he comes to Earth safely, and also people who are doing bungee jumping. And also when we read in the newspaper about some terrible terrorist attack, but we have not been hit, not our children, it was not our people who have been hit, then we have this endorphin release, and this is why people like to buy these newspapers and like to watch terrible things on terrorism on TV. This gives the impression that the people are more afraid of terrorism than they are, in fact, because everybody's watching these TV shows on terrorism. But it's because we have some kind of endorphin release when hearing about the bad things happening to other people. Also, when we have looking in a TV program like crime stories, on the right-hand side below there is a scene from a German crime story. Usually in the end, the offender is caught by the police, and this time you get an endorphin release. Because this is all happens in virtual reality. It's only a movie, but still people are afraid during this crime story, and in the end they have this endorphin release when someone is caught and goes to jail. There you see this young woman who is dead on the picture. That means if you're not afraid in the movie, if only maybe 100 Turkish lira are stolen in the movie, then no one would be afraid. It must be a terrible story behind it, like a young woman dead and or a little boy was hijacked. Otherwise, this principle wouldn't work. Next, please. But now I come to the end of my presentation. I'm going to talk about the good side of fear. Like in times of terror, in times of anxiety, people are organizing their life because always anxiety is a very important thing to organize your life. Because people who are a little bit under anxiety, they do the best things. This was from an old psychologist experiment that people who have high fear, high arousal, they have a bad performance, and people who have a medium arousal have the best performance, like maybe students who are afraid of not passing the exam. If they have medium fear, they have the best performance. If they have low fear, they have no performance at all. That means usually if you have medium fear, then you're doing the best things in life. And many achievements in literature, in science, in politics, and everywhere have been produced by this medium fear. Next slide, please. When you look at all these people, these are all actors. You might know most of them, famous actors like Tom Hanks and Brad Pitt. What they have in common? Not only that they earned more than $10 million per movie, because they are the most famous actors in the world. But also, everybody of these people on the picture said that in his childhood, they were socially anxious people. They had social phobia, everyone on this picture. Like Robert De Niro, he never played with the other children. He was sitting, reading books and didn't go out because he was afraid of the other kids. And Tom Hanks was also very shy. And Nicole Kidman, she said, I thought I was very ugly and very Australian and no one liked me. Everybody was very shy, so they turned their fear into achievements. They got famous, very famous, and the best actors. They did the opposite, like they did some kind of exposure therapy, and then now they're very famous, the opposite of social anxiety disorder, but just because of their fears. Next, please. Next slide, yeah. Yes, so I came to the end, and as I have to say that I think that we will not become a society of fear, because people will deal with anxiety. We will get used to it somehow, that bad things will happen, but in the end we'll find out that this is only terrorism, is only one out of the many dangers that we have in day-to-day life. We could die from a car crash, or just simply die from a rare disease and being shot by our wife, or many things can happen in this life, but most people still will not get afraid of these things. This is why I think that our societies will, in Turkey, in Germany, in France, will not change a lot. And there's hope that we will better deal with these things. We have to think of people who are living in very dangerous places, like in South Africa, where you can get ripped off every day, or in people who are living in the favelas of Sao Paulo, where there's many murderers, and around, or people who are living in Baghdad, where you have a bomb attack almost every 3 days. Also, these people get used to the fears. I also remember my mother was telling me a story when she was in when the American bombs fell on Germany in the Second World War. She was living in a city called Stuttgart, and everybody went down to, all the houses in Stuttgart went down to 1 meter, and also the house of my mother went down, but she was in a secured place when this happened. And she told me when we heard the planes flying over Stuttgart, we were afraid, but when the noise stopped, we just ran out and went to buy bread, and then we ran back again. So I couldn't imagine that people are still buying bread in these days when the bombs are falling. But people got used to even that, and my mother never developed post-traumatic stress disorder, although very bad things happened during the Second World War. And this is why I think that people, despite the terrorism attacks, despite all the bad things that come, will disturb our social life, people will not lose their quality of life and not their feeling of well-being. So I will finish with these words, and teşekkür ederim.